So Chris and I had decided that we were going to head down to the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America annual rally in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. Now the weather in our part of the world had been a lot hotter than normal, with highs in the high 30s Celsius, which is a little over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And we set off early in the morning to try and beat the heat, and we had a little over 700 kilometers or 450 miles to go. We definitely wanted to get to Bloomsburg and get settled in because we knew that there was going to be a GS Giants competition with a course they had built, and we wanted to be there to see it. Now the ride down was very uneventful, and basically we just did a lot of sweating, stopping for gas and to refill our camelbacks. And eventually we saw the sign for Bloomsburg, and here we are on the exit off the interstate. That would take us to the fairgrounds, where we expected to see 5,000 or 6,000 kindred souls and their bikes ready for some fun. Now, despite the temperatures, Chris and I had decided to be at GAT, all the gear all the time today. And you know what? Once you get rolling and the wind's blowing and your sweat starts evaporating, it's not that bad. And also, having the gear on actually protects you from the sun and kind of seals you in there. So I actually find it better than just riding along in a t-shirt and shorts when it's 100 degrees and then you just dry out. Well, if you've never been to one of these things, they always pretty much follow the same formula. You arrive, there's a big huge registration tent, you pay your registration fee, you get a bag with a schedule for all the activities, a list of all the vendors, and then you find a spot to set up your tent, and then you can either spend a couple of days going for day rides, which they're usually provided interesting routes around the location, or you can just spend some time walking around talking to people and kicking tires, or do some shopping. There's always plenty of vendors. And then at night there's always a big beer tent and music and live bands, and everybody's in a really good mood. We didn't get a lot of footage of that just because it was so brutally hot. We just kind of lost interest in carrying anything with us, so we didn't bring the camera with us much. So after registering, we mounted up again and headed off to find a good spot. Now, one of the things that always happens at these rallies is all the primo spots are always taken by the early arrivals. So if you show up like we tend to a day or so into this thing, it's pretty slim pickings.
Where's a good spot to put up? Have you seen any spots left anywhere? Right that way. All right, thanks.
Well, luckily for us, because of the crazy temperatures, a lot of people had bailed. A lot of people had just found it too hot and had left, so there was a lot of empty spots and people packing up when we got there. And so after a quick little tour, we ended up finding this excellent spot with a quick walk to the beer tent and a quick walk to the washrooms, and decided to set up camp there. After quickly setting up our gear, we headed down to the GS Giant track to see what that was all about. Now the object here is to do the course without putting a foot down, and there are bonus points for how fast you do the course, how big your bike is, as well as there are several places where you have a choice of 3 levels of difficulty which also affect the scoring. Now the course started off with a muddy kind of water crossing, then you'd come up to a rocky trail of big loose rocks, then a narrow muddy trench, a ride along a narrow ridge, and then there was a series of tight obstacles with pipes and logs, a few whoops, and then you had to run through a relatively deep sand patch, followed by a steep climb, and then an even steeper descent which had a 90-degree turn at the bottom. And then of course we were very excited to hear that the course would be open to the public on Saturday.
And he makes the turn. All right, round of applause for Eric. Making it really not good in that water crossing. So he goes around one of the berries. Looks like he's taken.
So Chris and I hung out at the GS Giant track for a little while. And even there, just standing there, the heat was pretty oppressive. But the guys looked like they were having a good time. And we started to get pretty psyched up about being able to ride the course tomorrow.
For him to get started again. Yep, there it is, and he's got to dig in there. Hopefully he doesn't dig in too much, because that thing will just sink in that mud. Not to mention, it rips up the course for the rest of the competitors, so hopefully no one gets stuck in that section. And now he's got to go up through that rocky section. We all know how treacherous it can be. Gotta keep the momentum on, keep his eyes up. If you look down at what you're going to ride over, it's too late. You're already hit. Lost his momentum there a little bit. You got to keep up your momentum riding over those rocks. It's tough because that front tire just wants to steer any which way. Now he's got a little bit sticky section. He's stuck, it appears to be, in a rut. He's got to rock himself back and forth and use the momentum of the bike to spin it. Momentum up. And he went off to the side.
And once again, you can see that life is a little easier in the rough stuff on a smaller bike. Now, Chris and I had a few reasons for being here at the MOA, other than an excuse to go for a nice long ride. Chris also wanted to buy some new tires, and he also needed a rear brake disc because he still hadn't replaced his brake disc, so he had done the trip down with no rear brakes. And we also thought we might get a chance to squeeze in having a few drinks. Now, our mechanical exploits got off to a bad start right away when Chris couldn't even get his suntan lotion to work.
It's plugged! Pump it! I did! All it did was expand the bottle.
We had found a vendor who would mount Chris's tires as long as we dismounted the wheels. So we set about the task, and of course the HP2 doesn't have a center stand, which is no big deal. Here you can see Chris is working up a pretty good sweat, and all we needed was a well-placed boot under one of the cylinders, and voila. Now, the HP2 sitting there on the ground with no wheels actually became a little bit of a tourist attraction. Every time we came back to our tent area, there always seemed to be somebody there taking a picture. Well, that night, Chris and I went to the beer tent and sank a few drinks, but it was even really too hot. We didn't even really feel like drinking, and we didn't get any footage of it, so we turned in early and lay on top of our sleeping bags in our tents, kind of stewing in our own juices. The next morning, we got the wheels back and mounted them up. More about Chris's axle bolt later. We even managed to get a great deal on a rear disc, and got that mounted up, and here you see the rear K60. Here we see a nice shot of the mighty 800, along with all the tools I bring to keep Chris's bike running.
Stabbed myself. Fucking needle.
Here we see Chris picking some aluminum out of the threads of his front axle from the now semi-stripped axle bolt.
Chris, tell us what's going on here, Bill.
Well, stripped the axle bolt, trying to dig the aluminum out of the thread so I can shove the fucking stripped axle bolt back in.
Nice. And then we're off to Bob's BMW to pick up a new bolt, and it's only 160 miles away.
It's actually $3.50 the bolt. Cheapest thing I think I've ever bought.
$3.50?
Yeah. $3.50, and these are $15 a pop.
So you're buying two, right?
I'm buying the steel one this time.
And you're buying two, right?
No, just one.
That's three. Okay, Chris, what are you doing here?
Re-torquing the caliper because we decided after having test ridden with my old pads that these marks, which are going to gouge the brand new disc, would be avoided by putting the new pads that the Spiegler guy insisted I put on the new disc on the bike.
And he was right.
And he was right, and it's a good thing I bought them.
And now we will fly through Chris's bike.
Torque.
So we loaded up all of our camping equipment and put on all of our gear and headed down to the GS Giant track to see if we could get a chance to do a few laps. Now, it was great to see all kinds of guys on different kinds of GSs just having fun on their bikes and not worrying about dropping them or getting them dirty. It seemed like most of the folks were stripping down their bikes to do the course, removing bags, mirrors, windshields, etc. And Chris and I mean, we were just too hot and lazy to do that, so we just decided to do it with all of our camping equipment and chairs and all that good stuff strapped to the bikes. So off I went on my first lap. So you started off here with this little blast through this loose sand, which we're kind of used to from our weekend rides, then up the relatively steep little hill. Now they reconfigured it without the 90-degree turn at the bottom, and then a man started running towards me with a popsicle. And one of the things I've learned is that when it's over 100 degrees and a man offers you a popsicle, you stop and eat it. Well, after finishing my Kool-Aid on a stick, I set off again. I avoided the deep water there on the right because I had all my camping equipment on and I didn't want to get it all mucky. And then it was on to the rocky section. Now these were some fairly big, round, loose rocks, but I kept my speed up and the steering damper certainly helped. Then it was into the muddy trench and, you know, just kept looking ahead and kept my speed up a little. And then you did this little corner, and then you had to ride along the top of this ridge, which was actually a little narrower than it looks there. After the ridge, there was a little tight section here where you had to drive between some things, and I was supposed to go between the pipes here, and I kind of botched that. Then after the pipe, there was some whoops. Now the whoops on the right were a little steep, and it looked like the 800s were bottoming out on them, so I decided to go on the medium whoops to the left. And then that was pretty much the, you know, the most interesting parts of the lap. You also had another section here where you had a relatively tight turn, and then you had to cross some logs. A few more shallow whoops, and that was a lot. So I decided I might as well do a second lap over the little starter bump. And then of course now I'm feeling a little cocky, which is always a bad thing. So I swing a little wide here to get a 90-degree turn into the sand. And through the sand once again. Up the hill. Down. Now theoretically I should have turned right there to go through the mud, but I was avoiding that. And then back onto the baby head rocks. Went a little faster this time and got a little out of control, and then I carried that speed into the trench and hit the trench and kind of just popped right out the other side, and decided just to stay on the grass. Now this kind of botched my entry into the ridge, so I popped up on the ridge a little out of sorts, and the front wheel slid off the right hand side and down I went. So I guess we'd better watch that again in super slow-mo. Now some very nice folks came right over and helped me pick up the bike. Gotta love those double take mirrors, no damage. And then once we had the bike upright and restarted, I decided to finish out the course, and then went over to park and check my wounds. And the damage report was the bike nothing, and on my body I had one finger and my shoulder, which would be sore till right after Christmas time, actually. It appeared Chris had also had a little tumble.
Right, Chris, what happened out there? We see evidence here of a mishap.
Got a lot of sand in my gear.
So we caught our breath and watched a few of the other guys ride around, and then we decided to make tracks and get the hell out of here. Now the organizers had done a great job, you know, running this place, and despite the fact that there was a constant stream of ambulances taking people away who had suffered from heat-related problems, they had guys in golf carts roaring around handing out free bottles of cold water, and they'd set up a bunch of sprinkler stations and stuff to let people cool off. The MOA Rally tends to move around the country from year to year. Sometimes it'll be in the western part of the United States, sometimes it'll be in the eastern part, sometimes it'll be more central. And if you've never been to one, it's not a bad time. I mean, you know, if you don't have to do a crazy commute to get there, and especially if you can get there early enough to do some of the GS rides and some of the local riding, it's a good time, and everybody there is in a really good mood, and you can pretty much walk up to anybody, anywhere, and just strike up a conversation like they're a buddy of yours. So if you've never been, you may want to check it out. Now normally most people would leave one of these events on the Sunday, and Chris and I had initially planned that we would probably leave on the Sunday as well, but it was pretty miserable walking around in this place in the heat, so that's why we decided to leave a day early. And we thought, you know, if we leave a day early, we can take a little more leisurely ride home instead of just jumping on the interstate and banging out 700-800 kilometers. So here we headed off, and we had one pit stop to make at Bob's BMW to buy the new axle bolt for Chris's front wheel. Although we were pretty confident the old one was going to hold. Certainly it had held through the GS course, so we were pretty sure it wasn't going to fall off on the interstate. Now I'll say it again because, you know, I still don't understand how guys can ride around in a t-shirt and flip-flops, because even on a day like today where it's 37, 8, 9 degrees Celsius, 100, 1, 2, whatever degrees Fahrenheit, Chris and I are both wearing all of our gear, and we're not dying, you know, like we're doing a little bit of sweating, but we're actually relatively comfortable when we were moving. I wore this same gear for a week in Costa Rica where it was hot and humid, and I didn't have any problems there either. Well, it was a pretty uneventful ride, and we just kept going. You know, we rode until it started getting dark, and we don't have any footage of that, but at one point we both started noticing that down in the ditches and on the shoulders there was just a lot of eyes looking back at us. And I think the heat was driving all the animals out of the woods, but when you start seeing big groups of deer on the side of the road, you know it's time to pull over and find some shelter for the night. And then we took the next exit and saw this tiny little sign half hidden in the bushes, which led us down this windy dirt road until we saw this very welcoming sign.
Dark. $45 a night for a motel room. There will probably be bed bugs.
That's great. Bonus.
It was a combination marina and motel, so after closing down the hotel bar, we grabbed some road beers, and optimistically it turned out Chris didn't last more than 5 minutes once we got back to our room. And then that night, for the first time in a couple of nights, we both had an amazing sleep due to our friend here, Mr. Air Conditioner. The next morning, Chris and I both woke up feeling refreshed, and of course there's nothing better than when you first wake up than looking at your F800Gs. Do not buy the bi-tubo inserts for your front forks, they lasted 1 day. And then we set off on this great ride. The temperature had dropped, and we spent the whole day just driving these nice, relaxed, twisty, 2-lane blacktop through this park. Very little traffic. About the only low spot of the day was when we walked into a small tourist information booth in one of the towns, and the lady working behind the counter thought that I was Chris's father, so that was a bit of a kick in the nuts. But then we kept rolling, and after a great ride across the border back into Canada, and eventually rolled back into Montreal and home. One last thing, if you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you think you'd like to see more videos from us, hit the subscribe button. And if you look in the description for this video, you will see a link to our website, apormc.com, as well as a link to our Facebook page. And if you go to our Facebook page, you can actually see some activity from some of our different chapters around the world. We've got some folks in Amsterdam putting up some videos. We got some folks in Germany. We should have some guys from the States starting to crank out some material soon. So check out our Facebook page. And if you are one of our associate members from around the world, and I was supposed to send you some stickers and you didn't get them for whatever reason, please drop me a line and we'll get that sorted out. And I guess that's it. So ends another Awesome Players off-road motorcycle adventure.